Hello, everybody. How are you? I'm all right. I hope you're all right too. I hope your day is going fantastically. Really fantastically. I'm back with another instalment of Hellfighters. It's been a while. I can't even remember what just happened. I'm just going to keep reading. Oh, yeah, they've got to Prague. They had a big fight on a train. They've got to Prague. And Herc has just... Herc has just told them there's somebody in the church, this abandoned church that used to hold the red door, which took them to the engine, but which isn't there anymore, the red door. So they're inside the church. There's somebody they want to meet, and we'll find out who. Okay. What's new? Herc went first, stepping into the ruined church. He didn't quite vanish. Not the way people did when they went through the red door. This close, she could still see the outline of his broad shoulders against the darkness, as slow and black as pitch. She reached tentatively after him, seeing the shadows creep up her fingers, the sensation like reaching into a freezer. When she pulled her hand out again, tendrils of darkness stuck to it, dissipating like smoke. "Any time you're ready, Pan," said Truck. "I gotta take a dump in the next 10 seconds, or I'm gonna pop." "Nice," she said, still not moving. "Who do you think's in there?" said Marlow. "You think it's a trap? You sure that was Herc?" "Yeah, it was him," she said, and she had no doubt. Every iota of him was just the way she remembered it. It was him, Herman Cole, in the flesh. Her hair was still damp from his tears. The thought gave her courage, and she pushed her hand back into that cold, silent darkness. Then she walked into the door. There was an instant where her body felt as if it were quietly being pulled apart, like the gossamer thin bonds between each cell were expanding. Then, just as quick, the sensation was gone. "Not so bad, right?" asked Herc. He stood in front of her, and behind him was the mangled body of the church. Honey-coloured light dripped in from the ceiling, pooling on a tiled floor that was thick with rubble and rot. The pews were in disarray, scattered like bones. The windows were boarded tight, the altar stripped bare of everything but an overturned table. There was a wooden cross on the wall, but all that remained of the figure it had once held was a puddle of bronze on the floor, like it had melted. "Better than walking through the red door," she said, shuddering at the memory. She'd walked into this church 100 times or more, but she'd never seen the inside before. The red door had always carried her someplace else. "Got that right," Herc said. "Door's gone, but it's left its mark. Look." He pointed over her shoulder, and she turned to see the courtyard, Truck and Marlow standing there, looking right at her. They were moving like puppets, fast and jerky. Everything speeded up. She was smiling before she even knew it. Last time I saw Truck move that fast was when I told him the lawyers had started serving bacon donuts for lunch," Herc said, as the big guy pushed his way inside, slowing down to real time. Truck shivered, then pulled a pained expression. "Oh, bastard cramps," he grunted. "I think I'm crowning. You got a John in here?" "Nice to see you too, Truck," said Herc. "Past the altar, down the stairs. No can anymore, but there's a sink and a floor. Take your pick." "Oh, gross," said Pan. "Hey, when you gotta go," said Truck, scooting down the aisle. It sounded like somebody was playing the trumpet in his pants. "Sorry!" Marlow was the last, almost falling through the door. He staggered, nobody there to catch him, dropping onto one knee and gagging. Pan felt a sudden rush of sympathy for him. He'd been duped, just like the rest of them, and he had that added burden of guilt on his shoulders. All of this on top of the fact that he'd been an engineer for less than a week. The poor kid's mind must be on the verge of shattering. But still, if it hadn't been for him insisting that Charlie was safe, pleading with them to help him, convincing Herc and Hansen to let his friend into the engine, then she'd be standing inside the Pigeon's Nest right now, their headquarters, named for the disgusting Nazi decor left over from the war and the legions of dead pigeons, popping the tab on a Diet Coke and watching TV with Knight. She turned away, left him to get up by himself. The corners of the church were still crowded with darkness, impenetrable. Oh, I think that was the door. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. It was the postman. Or the mailman, as lots of you will say. He was admiring, we've just got a dinosaur in the garden, a big one from one of the charity trails that they do, a big T-Rex in our garden, and so everyone wants to stop and talk about it, which is cool. I'll have to show you a picture. Anyway, yes, here. Okay, she turned away, left him to get up by himself. The corners of the church were still crowded with darkness, impenetrable even though her eyes had adjusted. She couldn't see anyone else here, though. "Who did you want us to meet, Herc?" she asked him. He looked over his shoulder into a pocket of nothing beside the altar. "You won't believe me if I tell you," he said. "Hey, Shep. They're here." Shep? Pan felt something shift inside her, thought that any minute now she was going to have to scamper after Truck and make use of whichever receptacle he wasn't occupying. Herc couldn't mean. There was no way. From the shadows came a nervous cough, then a sniff, followed by a voice that was choked by its thick European accent. "Are you sure it is them?" It had lost its ring of authority, but she still stood to attention as soon as she heard it, fast enough to give herself a head rush. "Holy shit, it's them," said Herc. "No doubt. Pan, Marlow, let me introduce you guys to Shepel Ostheim." Pan panicked, not sure whether to bow or salute or curtsy. She did a combination of all three, feeling like an idiot. Shepel Ostheim, the general who ran the fist, the guy who had overseen every single operation for as long as she'd been here, the man she'd only ever spoken to on the phone, whom nobody had met, of whom nobody had ever seen so much as a photo. Until now. Another nervous cough, then the sound of scuffing footsteps. The silhouette of a man appeared in the dark, low and stooped, an old-fashioned fedora hat, the glint of glasses. Then he stepped into the light, and Pan had to do a double take because this guy didn't match the image she'd had in her head, not one bit. She'd always pictured Ostheim as one of those movie stars that were aged but not past their prime. One of the ones that looked like they could take a break from their bridge game and still kick your ass. A Tommy Lee Jones or a Harrison Ford or a Morgan Freeman. The man who stood in front of her looked more like Toby Jones, short and slightly plump, drowning in a cheap brown suit and tie. He took off his glasses and wiped them on his jacket, pushing them back onto his nose and blinking through them like a frightened dormouse. He cleared his throat, took another step forward, then took off his hat. Beneath was a comb-over of epic proportions, one that drooped over his face. He smoothed it away, then seemed to finally find the courage to walk to Herc's side. Even when he straightened, he only came up to Herc's shoulder. "I am sorry for my manners," he said. "It has been a difficult few days. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Pan. And Marlow, yes?" Marlow had made it back onto his feet, and he stood next to Pan, offering his hand. "Marlow," he confirmed. Ostheim stared at his outstretched palm for a while, making no attempt to greet it. Eventually Marlow let his arm drop to his side, sharing a look with Pan that said, "Seriously?" "I am really sorry again," Ostheim said. "It has been a long time since I was among people. Please forgive my rudeness. But I am not a well man." He laughed apologetically. "Germs are everywhere, yeah?" "No worries," said Marlow. "It's cool." "You are fine," Ostheim said. "Both of you, yes? You're not injured?" "We took a beating," said Marlow. "My knees got grilled. Nothing we can't handle." "What happened tonight?" Herc asked. "How did she?" "She went out fighting," said Pam. "It was a magpie. Marlow tried to rescue a girl and the son of a bitch stole her body, grabbed Knight and threw himself off the bridge. She didn't stand a chance." "You're sure she's—" "I'm sure," spat Pan. "She was under contract. They came for her." Herc's head fell. Ostheim gently placed his hat on the nearest pew so that he could clean his glasses again. This time he didn't put them back, just stared at them as if they might hold all the answers. "I am sorry," he said again, a broken record. "She was a brave engineer, one of the best, a soldier. She did not deserve to be murdered like that." "No, she didn't," said Pan, and she would have gone on except another rolling wave of sickness rippled outward from her stomach, drenching her in cold sweat. "Herc, can we just get the hell out of here?" "It is unfortunate," said Ostheim, "but necessary. Herc suggested that we meet here. He never gave up hope, and I see now he had no reason to. He said that you would make your way to Prague sooner or later. Even if he had not, I would have suggested it. The Red Door was a knife wound in the fabric of reality, one that has been here for centuries. Even though the door has gone, you cannot rend time and space in that way without leaving a permanent wound. That sickness you feel, it is the engine in your blood. It is crying out for the other side. Great, Pan thought. But it also serves to mask us. Mammon will be searching. He located you once by sniffing out the engine inside you. He will do so again. But here, in the scar of the red door, we are hard to find. He finally replaced his glasses, patting the seat of a pew. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Sitting down was the last thing Pan wanted to do. But what choice did she have? She scuffed her way through the rubble and dirt, lowering herself onto the uncomfortable bench. You too, Mr. Green, said Ostheim. Marlow sighed, slumping down next to her. Ostheim sat on the pew opposite, running a hand over his thinning hair again. Pan noticed that his fingers were trembling, until he clamped them between his legs. He blinked at the floor a couple of times, placing his hand on the leather briefcase beside him, as if to check that it was still there. I do not need to tell you how bad this situation is, in which we find ourselves, how serious it is. You're not kidding, said Truck, as he appeared from the stairs. He wafted his hand in front of his face. I think I just opened the gates of hell down there all by myself. Truck, growled Herc. Truck spotted Ostheim, frowning. Who's the old dude? He asked. Pan almost slapped a hand over her face. Truck, this is Ostheim, she said. The big guy stopped dead, his mouth hanging open. To Pan's surprise, Ostheim laughed. There is no need to be startled, Truck. It is a pleasure to meet you. Please, join us. Truck did as he was told, the bench bowing as he lowered himself onto it. Damn, he said again. I'm glad you're here. Pan was too, glad to see Herc and Ostheim. For the first time since New York, she felt like she could switch off, like she wasn't the one who had to make all the decisions. The relief of it made the weight of darkness inside the church twice as heavy, made her feel as if she could close her eyes right now and sleep for a week. Only the sickness that boiled in her stomach and the poisonous red door whispers that hissed at her from inside her skull kept her awake. It was my grandfather's grandfather who first found the engine, you know, said Ostheim. A long, long time ago. Long before the Nazis invaded Prague and took it for themselves. It was he who first found the red door of Praha and who learned to open it. Of course, he was one of the first to be taken, when he tried to use the engine. But his son, my great-grandfather, spent his life there, learning everything there was to know about this infernal creation. It was he who learned about the two groups who had once waged war, the Circle and the Fist. He searched for the facts of it, the truth that was buried inside the lie of history, and he vowed that he would do everything he could to prevent the engine from falling into the wrong hands. Ostheim cleared his throat, staring into nothing, into the past. It is a burden that we have all taken upon ourselves to carry, generation after generation. Ours is not a happy story. It is one of constant struggle and plagued with many deaths. But I like to think that without it, the world would be a very different place. If we had not fought so hard, then the engines might have already been reunited. And now they have been, said Pan. Not quite, said Ostheim. Mammon will not know how to join the engines. He will not know how to open the gates. That's good, right? Said Truck. But, said Ostheim, raising a finger, the engines themselves will know. It is all they dream of. It is the purpose they serve. They were designed to be united. They were created for that one reason, to open a door into hell. Pan shuddered so hard the pew creaked. She wrapped her hands around herself, straitjacket tight, leaning forward. They were designed to make bargains, weren't they? Truck said, to get souls. Yes, they were, but this is... He threw his hands up. I don't know, this is just a fluff filler. It is like saying that the purpose of a car is to keep you dry during a storm. It will, but it is designed for so much more. As far as we are aware, the engines were built this way so that men would never lose them. An old machine buried beneath the ground can be easily dismissed, yeah? But a machine that can grant any wish, not so easy to forget. But who, Pan asked? Who could have built them? I mean, not that. The devil? Ostheim fixed his small, blinking eyes on her. How we do not know, child. Who can say? Not even in all the books we have found, in all the histories of all the world, have we discovered the answer to that question. But ask yourself this. With everything that you have seen, everything that you have experienced, everything that you have fought, and everything you have lost, who do you think built these things? This time it was Ostheim who shuddered, a spasm passing through him, hard enough to knock loose those lonely strands of hair from his oily scalp. I have said this to all of you before. The divide between our world and theirs is paper thin. He waved a hand through the air. The demons are here right now, teeming on the other side of the void. Old magic keeps them there, the first rulers of the universe. But all it takes is one tear, one rip, and they will flood the world in an ocean of blood. Hey, said Marlow. Like that girl's knife. The redhead. She was jabbing it and stuff, and demons were coming out. Ostheim's eyebrows nearly launched themselves off the top of his head. This is true? I did not think it possible. A knife made from the engine, yes? Pan shrugged, saying, yeah, I think so. Then the engines are indeed growing more powerful. If a piece of them can open a rift to hell, even a small one such as that, then it means the mechanism is orienting himself to open the gates. You see, the engines were created to be the blade that makes such a tear, to let the demons through. And they will not come alone. Pan closed her eyes and saw it, the creature inside the engine, never up close, never in detail, just a mountain of madness on the edge of her vision, one that studied her with a clutch of eyes that looked like festering holes in meat, who asked her in a million voices what she wanted to trade her soul for, and whose laugh was the sound of a million bones breaking. She'd always known it. Past the exhilaration of getting a new contract, past the adrenaline of each mission, Mammon and the enemy engineers were just pawns. This thing was the king. Mammon will be working hard. He will be locked away, focused on discovering how to bring the engines together. But Mammon was there, said Pan, on the train. Ostheim frowned, swiping his hair back into place. What? He said, when he'd recovered. He was there, Pan said again. I don't know if it was him or if he was just projecting himself or something, but there was no doubt about it. He made a house grow out of the front of the train, said Marlow. He spoke to me, said Pan. And what did he say? Asked Ostheim, his glare burrowing into her. I don't know. I don't remember. Pan pushed her mind back, but it was reluctant to go there. I'm here to help. He said something about helping us. I don't know. Mammon is a master of deception, Ostheim said. He has learned from the best. He is himself a father of lies. He was there to distract you, or to kill you. You only have to look at the noble knight to see his intentions. But if all he wants to do is unite the engines, said Marlow, then why chase us halfway across Europe? It's not like we're in a position to stop him. No, said Ostheim, and for the first time they had met, his eyes lit up. But that is where you are wrong, my young friend. Mammon may have the engines, and he may have engineers, but he is not invulnerable. Far from it. He knows that you are still a threat, that you will be coming after him. You're saying we can find him, said Marlow. Yes. And we can crush his ass, asked Truck. Oh, yes. And what's the but? Asked Pan, sensing one hanging in the air between them. Ostheim smiled, revealing a row of small, neat teeth. Ah, yes. The but. A simple one. But it will not be easy, Pan. Not easy at all. And if we fail, then you will not just lose your physical body. Your soul will be torn apart for all eternity. And the world will end, added Herc matter-of-factly. Pan laughed. Soul shredded? World ended? What's new? He would have said yes. It may be hard to believe now, said Ostheim, but we have a number of things in our favour. He would have said yes as the title chapter, by the way. I didn't just randomly insert those words into the story. It may be hard to believe now, said Ostheim, but we have a number of things in our favour. The old guy opened his leather briefcase, and Marlow took the opportunity to study him. Admittedly, he'd spoken to Ostheim only once by phone, but this wasn't who he'd pictured on the other end of the line. The voice he'd heard then had the voice he'd heard then had been little more than a whisper, but it had radiated power. This guy was a joke. If Marlow had seen him walking through the streets of Mariners Harbour, he probably would have started calling him names and lobbing beer cans at him. Ostheim found what he was looking for, setting a sheaf of coffee-coloured papers down on the pew next to him. One, we still have powers. He glanced at Truck. Not you, I am afraid. Then at Marlow. And you, friend, I imagine they will turn to your contract next. You are strength and speed, yes? Marlow nodded. The good looks are all mine. Nobody laughed. An easy contract to break, which is a pity, but they will still require a day at least, hopefully more. Pan, am I right in thinking that Patrick Grabar told you that your contract would be left to expire? Yeah, Pan said. He said it right before the demons dragged his sorry ass down to hell. Him and his wormbag sister. I heard, no mean feat defeating a resurrected soul like Brianna. The fact that you won that battle is what gives me hope. He smiled again, but it was short-lived. It would be cruel of them to let you die like that, Pan, but I would not take Patrick's word for it. Mammon knows that you are more dangerous with powers than without, and I would not be at all surprised if he set about stripping you of your contract. Pan blew out a long, unsteady breath, and Marlow could almost feel the relief ebbing from her, could almost hear her reciting, "Please, please, please." She must have sensed him watching, because she shot a scowl his way. He twisted his head back to Ostheim so hard that his neck spasmed. "So yes, we have powers." "Don't forget about these babies," said Truck, flexing his biceps. The flab of his arms grew firm, like two melons hiding beneath a blanket. "Of course," said Ostheim. "And Herman, I know that you have resources." "Damn right I do," he grunted. "Good, we have our army. It is small, but it is not without merit. It is enough." "If you say so," Marlow thought. "You said a number of things," said Pan. "What else?" "I am afraid that by a number I really meant 2, Ostheim said. He turned to the papers, lifting the top one and unfolding it. It was the size of a bedsheet, and he struggled to lay it out on the church floor. Marlow craned in, seeing that it was a map, an old one. "This is Paris, circa 1400. "Paris," said Truck, nodding. "City of love." "Indeed," said Ostheim, "although not in this case." "You think this is where the engine is?" asked Marlow. Ostheim sighed. "Perhaps if you all let me speak, you will find out. What you must remember is that the engine itself has not moved. It cannot move. It is simply too big and too complex. Whoever designed the engines created them so that each would have a single entrance and a single exit." "The red door," said Pan. Even hearing her say it seemed to make Marlow's head pound the same way it had the first time he'd been here, just before Pan had led him into the nest. "The red door," said the old man. "Each of the engines has one. A wound in the world, a scalpel taken to the flesh of our universe. The engine's creator cut a hole right through space and time, then sealed it tight with something right out of hell, something conjured with old magic. When Mammon breached our red door and entered the nest, he did not seek to move the engine. He only wanted to hide the entrance. He reprogrammed the red door so that it would be hidden, so that it would no longer open." "But how?" asked Pan. "Because he is powerful," said Ostheim. "He is the most powerful entity I know. He has used the engine so many times that it is permanently in his blood. He is not yet a devil, but he is well on his way." "One of the Pentarchy," said Marlow, remembering what Pan had told him. "One of the 5. "A quaint title, but meaningless. There have only ever been 2 foolish enough or wicked enough to push the engine to its limits, Mammon and a woman called Meridiana." Here Ostheim hawked up a ball of phlegm and spat it across the church. It sat on the stone floor, glistening. "She paid the price for her greed. Her suffering will—" He seemed to remember himself, smoothing down the map. "It matters not. If we had kept the engines apart, then eventually Mammon would have gone the same way as her. Make too many contracts and the very fabric of your being changes. It corrupts. When you reach the point of no return, then even a cancelled contract leaves its mark. It makes you powerful, yes, but it takes much more. It possesses you." Marlow squeezed his fists, felt the strength there, and suddenly hated it. "Now, though, with both engines at his command, Mammon's powers are immense. He was able to cut the red door off from every one of its locations." "But he can still get out," said Marlow. "I mean, there must still be a door." "Clever boy," said Ostheim. "There is still a door. The red door exists, but only in one location, its original one." "Where the engine was built," said Pan. Ostheim nodded. "That door simply cannot be moved. It can be concealed. It can be bricked over, but it cannot be moved." "And it's in Paris?" asked Marlow. "That I cannot say for sure," Ostheim went on, "but it is my best guess." Marlow heard Pan sigh. "So it might just be in Paris," she said, "which happens to be one of the biggest cities in Europe and home to a few 100,000 buildings and a few million people. No problem." "Hey," said Herc, "don't forget who you're talking to, kid." Ostheim held up a hand to calm him. "It is not their fault, Herman. Please, as I was saying, we have another thing in our favour. Mammon is seeking to unite the two engines, and this will cause him problems. Two machines of this magnitude, of this power, cannot exist even close to each other without producing a signal. Think of it like two transmitters positioned next to each other, emitting feedback. The comparison didn't exactly help, and Ostheim must have seen the look on Marlow's face. You do not need to know the science. Just know this. For as long as the engines are in Mammon's possession, until the moment he unites them, we stand our best chance of finding them. And destroying them, said Marlow. Yes, Ostheim said, once and for all. So we're heading to Paris, said Herc. Now. Nobody seemed to respond, other than an exhausted yawn from Truck. Now, Herc said. Come on, who are we? Hellraisers, said Truck. I said, who are we? Herc tried again. This time everyone joined in. Hellraisers. That's right, he said. He walked off, disappearing down the stairs, wafting his hand in front of his face. Hell's bells, Truck, what have you been eating? What hasn't he been eating? Pan said, jumping to her feet. Marlow was about to follow her when Ostheim called his name. The little guy was pushing himself up, those renegade strands of hair falling over his face again. Marlow had a sudden urge to grab a pair of scissors and snip them off. Ostheim walked stiffly to the far corner of the church and beckoned with his fingers. Marlow hesitated, looking to Pan for help and getting nothing but her cold shoulder. Come, Marlow, said Ostheim. I will not bite. Marlow popped his lips, then made his way over the rough ground, through the pool of sunshine, back into shadow. Ostheim was clearing his glasses again, and he replaced them on his nose to study Marlow intently. I know this has been hard for you, he said after a moment. You were betrayed by somebody you called a friend, Charlie. He took you for a fool. He took us all for fools. His actions have brought this world closer to ruin than anything in history. Marlow hung his head, wishing that the floor would open up beneath him, a demon's mouth swallow him whole. Better that than to stand here being reminded of his own mistakes, because that's what Ostheim was really saying, wasn't it? Your actions, Marlow, your actions have brought the world closer to ruin than ever before. No, said Ostheim, those small eyes like chips of obsidian, gleaming in the dark. No, Marlow, I do not blame you, and neither should you pour blame upon yourself. This is what Mammon wants, to divide us, to make us weak. Tell me. Oh, lost my place. This is what Mammon wants, to divide us, to make us weak. Tell me, honestly, did you know what Charlie's intentions were? Marlow spluttered out the ghost of a laugh. He couldn't even believe it now, despite everything he'd seen, everything that had happened. Not Charlie, his best friend, his only friend. They'd known each other for so many years, inseparable until this. No, he said, locking eyes with Ostheim. I had no idea. Ostheim studied him for a moment, then nodded. Why do you think he did it? I don't know, said Marlow. I guess he was pissed at me for leaving him when all this kicked off. But I didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't want anything to happen to him. Some of the greatest tragedies in history were born from good intentions, said Ostheim. They must have got him to him. Mammon and the others, they must have taken control of him somehow. No, said Ostheim. No, if they had poisoned Charlie's mind, his personality, then Hansen would have sensed it before bringing him into the nest, even if he was unconscious. No, this was Charlie's doing, pure and simple. It was his choice. I don't know. They must have convinced him then. But it doesn't make sense. I mean, he was a good guy. He got pretty worked up sometimes, threw a few punches, but he always did the right thing. I don't get why he would have joined him. It's like I said. Mammon is a father of lies, a master deceiver. Charlie may not even know that he is fighting for the wrong side. Yeah, said Marlow, nodding. That thought hadn't even occurred to him. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Can you tell me anything about him? Anything that might help us? Marlow chewed his lip, staring into the corners of the church. Family he may try to contact? Brothers or sisters? Other friends he could reach out to? No, said Marlow. He was in foster care most of his life. No brothers, a sister somewhere, but they haven't been in touch for years. He didn't really... he wasn't the kind of guy you warmed to easily, you know? Kept the walls high, kept the door locked, until he trusted you. And your school, would he have tried to make contact? School? Marlow shook his head. Hell no. He was doing good there, but he hated it just as much as I did. Very well, said Ostheim. One more question, Marlow, and this is the most important. If we find the engine, if we find Charlie, will you be able to convince him of the truth? Will you be able to win him back to our side? Marlow closed his eyes, thought back. The first time he'd met Charlie, the kid had been about to beat 2 high school football players into the ground. He'd talked him down then, even though he'd almost lost some teeth for his trouble. And how many times since had they held each other back, stopped each other doing something really, really stupid? More than he could count. Yeah, he said. I can talk him around. Ostheim smiled. That is good news, very good news indeed. We may stand a chance here, Marlow. We may yet pull this world back from the brink. He smiled again, and then began to walk away. Mr. Ostheim, said Marlow. But when the old man turned around, he couldn't find the strength to carry on. What was he supposed to say? I'm too scared? I can't do this? How would that sound? But it was the truth. His brother, Danny, had been the soldier. He'd been the one to charge into gunfire, to put himself on the line for his country, for his friends. Danny had been the hero. And look where it had gotten him. Blown to pieces by a roadside bomb, scattered over the Afghan countryside, his coffin empty. Ostheim scrutinised him, and once again he seemed to pluck the thoughts right out of Marlow's head. Can I tell you something, Marlow? Can I tell you a secret? I never wanted to do this. When I was a child growing up in Vienna, all I ever wanted was to be a musician. The piano was my thing. He played an invisible one, his eyes twinkling at the memory. I had 3 brothers born before me, and a sister too, and every single one of them wanted to follow my father's art, wanted to carry on our family's duty to the fist. Their only ambition was to study the engine, to work out what it was and how it could wield so much power. Their only dream in life was to locate its twin, to find the other engine so that they could destroy any chance the circle had of opening the gates. They were the jewels of my father's eye, the pride and joy of my grandfather. What happened to them? Marlow asked, when Ostheim didn't go on. They died, of course, all of them. These were the days before the lawyers, you understand. Our contracts, even the easiest of them, were unbreakable. One by one my father needed them, and one by one they sacrificed themselves to his command, until only I remained. There was a shout from across the church, Herc yelling that it was time to go. I tell you this because I, too, was scared. I cannot convey to you the extent of the fear I felt, and how crippling it became. I wanted no part of this, no part at all, in my father's work. I just wanted a chance to live my life like every other soul in the world. But you're here, said Marlow. I am here, yes, I am here, because I understood that fear is simply imagining the worst that might happen. It's your mind's way of keeping you from harm, a preventative measure. Back then, as a child only slightly younger than you, I thought the worst that could happen was my own passing, my own sad little fate. And that isn't the worst thing that can happen, Marlow asked. Tell me, if you could ask your brother what question, what would it be? Marlow frowned. The truth was, he couldn't even remember Danny. He'd been so young when he'd heard he wasn't coming home. All he had to go on was that fading photo on his kitchen wall. Danny in his combat gear, his smile the brightest thing in the desert sun. It made him think of his mum, sitting at home, slowly drowning in Bacardi. It felt like somebody had crushed his heart in their fist, and his face twisted with the pain of it. I'd ask him, what, why he'd signed up, why he'd wanted to fight. The answers to those questions were too easy. He'd fought for freedom, he'd fought for what was right, he'd fought for Mum, for his kid brother, and for Marcy, the girl he'd always liked. Marlow stared into the shadows, and for an instant he thought he saw him there. A tall, well-built figure, wearing sand-blown desert camo and Oakley shades. Danny, shaking his head and smiling. Marlow blinked, and the figure was gone. He turned back to Ostheim. I'd ask him if he thought it was worth it. Dying, I mean. I'd ask him if he thought he'd made a difference. And what would his answer be? This time Marlow smiled. Yes, he said. And some of the fear had floated away, had left him like a cloud passing out from in front of the sun. He would have said yes. There you have it, Marlow, said Ostheim, walking away. Now come, we have a war of our own to fight. And I'll do one more, but I've just got to check that I've got room on my computer because it is... Oh yeah, we're all right. It's filling up with videos of me reading books. Oh, part 2, retaliation. What was the first part? Oh, instigation, retaliation. I can't remember what the third part's called. I think it's annihilation. Okay. Bienvenue is the title of the next chapter. How long have we got? Oh, we've got time. Herc, we got a problem. The helicopter banked hard, the ground lurching up in the port windows and the sun burning through everything starboard. Pan could feel the pulse of the blades inside every cell of her body, a roar in her blood that might have been the engine itself. She gripped the edge of her seat until her stomach had stopped doing somersaults. Truck was sitting on the seat opposite her, and he leaned over his shoulder, yelling to Herc. Herc, I mean it, a big problem. We got 10 seconds, maybe less. It's going to blow. I'm doing the best I can, Herc's reply was fed into her ears through a giant pair of headphones. The chopper levelled, and through the window Pan could make out the Eiffel Tower, a single finger rising towards the heavens like Paris was flipping them the bird, saying, Go away, you're not welcome here. We can't land for another 5. Can you hold it off? I ain't holding nothing, Truck said. Pan? Herc pleaded. Pan turned to the seat next to her. She didn't think it was possible for anyone to actually turn green, but Marlow was doing his best Grinch impression right now. He was gagging like a cat about to cough up a hairball. Sorry, Herc, she said. Detonation imminent. Oh, God damn it! Marlow doubled up and sprayed the contents of his stomach across the chopper floor and over Truck's shoes. Truck screamed in an impressive falsetto, pulling his legs up like a cartoon elephant that's seen a mouse. Marlow hurled again, just a dribble this time. Marlow, yelled Herc, you're cleaning that up before we go. Marlow crunched back against the seat, his face slick with puke and sweat. He looked at Pam with an expression that said, just kill me now, and she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Her own guts squirmed again as the helicopter descended, the streets and trees and houses and people zooming into focus below. Herc steered them over a wide grey river, all the while speaking to somebody on the radio. There was a gold and black skyscraper up ahead, standing alone in a sea of smaller buildings. Man, they were my favourite sneakers, said Truck, doing his best to scrape off the sick against the edge of the seat. He opened his mouth, turning to the seat next to him, whatever he was about to say dying in his throat. Pan could see it. The moment he remembered, Knight wasn't sitting there. Truck glanced over at Pan, then turned to the window, jaw clenched. Pan had to swallow something huge down her throat. Knight would have loved this. Yeah, they were on a mission. Yeah, they probably would all be dead in a couple of days. But Knight loved the travelling, loved the adventure. Seeing a new city was the thing she got most excited about. She'd have had her hand on the door already, jiggling impatiently, ready to spring out and breathe in a big lungful of somewhere new. And instead, she was burning up in hell, a demon's plaything. Hold on to your hats, said Herc as the apartment tower vanished beneath them. The chopper dropped, rotating slowly. And Marlow, if one more thing comes out of your mouth before we land, then I'm going to eject you into the 15th arrondissement, okay? Got it, croaked Marlow, swiping the back of his hand over his lips. The helo bumped as it landed, the thrum in Pan's body fading as the rotors slowed. She breathed in deeply, the stench of vomit overpowering. Grabbing the handle, she wrestled the door open, stepping into the heat and the wind of a Paris afternoon. She ducked beneath the rotors, walking as close to the edge of the building as she dared. The vast city sprawled out before her, sparkling in the sun and shimmering in the haze that rose from the roof. It didn't look real. Her insides still hummed, and it was nothing to do with the helicopter. Her engine was out there somewhere. Both the engines. And they were calling. Whoa, said Marlow as he joined her. He had some of his colour back, but she still didn't trust him not to simply wilt over the side. Nice view. She didn't reply, turning to see Herc and Truck clamber out of the helicopter. Ostheim wasn't with them. The old guy had gone to speak to some friends in high places in order to get them into Paris unseen. Pan still couldn't get over how ordinary he'd seemed. The guy who turned up at the door to sell you replacement windows, or who did your dad's taxes. The sight of him in the flesh hadn't exactly boosted her confidence, but then this was Ostheim. He was legendary. Whatever his secret was, he kept it well hidden. Herc was on the edge of the landing pad, talking to someone in a suit. They shook hands, a heavy white envelope passing from Herc to the man. And the other guy walked off with a big smile. He shot them a glance as he went, and she wondered what he was thinking. 3 kids and an old guy rocking into Paris on the sly? He probably thought they were pop stars. Pop stars that had just been in a bar fight with a herd of rhinos. You ready? Herc bellowed over the whine of the chopper. She nodded, skipping between the air conditioning units and joining Herc by the stairs. He held the door open for her, and she jogged down a couple of flights into the main body of the building. There was an elevator dead ahead, and she jammed her thumb on the button. Behind her, the others stepped out of the stairwell. "So we're here," said Truck. "What now?" "Now we hunt," said Herc. "Like Shep said, the fact that the engines are closer than ever means they'll be louder than ever. You guys feel anything?" "Nope," said Truck. "Got diddly." "You won't," said Herc. "Your contract's popped. The engine isn't in you anymore. Pan, Marlow, how about you guys?" "Feeling pretty sick," said Marlow as the elevator doors opened. "Does that count?" "Nope, that's just you being the whiniest landlubber in history," said Herc. The elevator car wobbled as they stepped inside, the doors sliding shut. Herc pressed the button for the lobby. "Pan?" Her body answered for her, a shudder passing up her spine. The electrostatic energy was boiling up her veins, making the inside of her skin itch. One wrong move, one twitch or sneeze, and she might just bring down the whole tower. But she felt strangely vulnerable too, like she was made of glass. That infinitesimal hum she felt inside her at just the right pitch and frequency to shatter her into a million pieces. Being under contract had made her feel a million different things, but she'd never felt this before. This was new. "Yeah," she said. "I've got something." "Good," said Herc. "Good. You just keep focusing on whatever that something is, and we stand a good chance of finding wherever it is we need to go." "Wow, specifics. I like it," muttered Pan. The elevator counted down the last few floors, then eased to a halt, opening up at the end of a large lobby. It was packed with a muddle of office staff and what looked like tourists lining up behind a red rope. The rush of voices and movement was overwhelming, and the anxiety of it hit Pan like a physical blow. She shrank away, backing into Marlow, felt his hand on her shoulder, and the weight of it anchored her. Held her still for long enough to draw a shaky breath. "You can do this." She followed her thoughts out into the lobby, heading into the crowd. Somebody in the queue shouted something in a New Jersey twang, and she looked to see a family there, all four of them wearing baseball caps, the perfect cliché. And God, didn't it just make her feel homesick? She wanted to run over and join them, go see the sights of Paris, eat frogs' legs and snails and royales with cheese or wherever it was they served here. She didn't want to have to go find an engine, fight a bunch of engineers and mammon and demons and worse. It felt like the whole weight of the tower was pushing down on her, and she had to gulp at the air again, everything underwater. Then they were out, pushing into the muggy heat of the city. It hit her like New York did, that rush of traffic and people and noise, so much noise. The air swam with sirens and a ceaseless crescendo of horns from the cars, shouts and barks, and the thump of their departing helicopter as it soared away overhead. She bit her lip hard, following Herc as he strode across a wide stone plaza towards the road. "First things first," he said over his shoulder, and she lost the rest because a couple of men on the far side of the square suddenly started swinging punches at each other. Great big haymakers that hit nothing but air. They were both yelling in French, their eyes wide with rage. A fist connected, a nose exploded, then a couple of security guards from the tower were there, blocking her view. Nice, she thought. And she would have said more, except the world started to tilt, a rush of vertigo like she'd just stepped off a roller coaster. It lasted only a second, but it was enough to send her staggering to the side. She blinked, and everything was normal again. All except Truck. He was staring at her. Hey, I didn't see the minibar on the chopper, he said with a soft smile. You could have shared. There were more shouts coming from the street, a couple of taxi drivers slinging insults at each other from their vehicles. I thought you said this was a city of love, Marlow said, as they walked towards the cabs. They reached the sidewalk and Herc rapped on the window of one of the taxis, the driver spinning in his seat and grunting something at them. Rue St. Paul, Herc said. Tout de suite, oui? The driver looked at them like they'd just spat on his windshield. Then he reluctantly waved them in. It was a tight squeeze, Truck taking up most of the back seat, Marlow almost perched on his lap. But soon they were moving. The traffic crawled, made worse by the fact that at least 3 other fights broke out on the way, one between a couple of teenage guys, one among a group of girls, and one between an old man and what looked like a nun. Did you guys see that? Pan said as they tore past. Never pick a fight with a nun, said Truck, one hand rubbing his temples. Those gals got magic powers. Hey, Marley, you want to move up there maybe? The big guy shot Marlow a .44 caliber scowl, and Marlow tried to shuffle to the side, his elbow hitting Pan in the ribs. Again, that rush of panic flooded her, like she was an empty bucket held in a cold river. Get off, Marlow, she said, elbowing him back. She felt like putting her hand to his face and unleashing a blast of lightning. See how much he shuffled then. You kids stop fighting back there, Herc roared. I swear I'll rip your... He paused, massaging his head. Jesus, he said. Anyone else feel that? Pan swallowed down a mouthful of bile and the city lurched again, barely noticeable, but definitely there. The subtlest of buzzes, like a fly trapped in your fist. She looked out the window and the street shimmered, the lines blurring for a fraction of a second. And she could almost see it. Everyone's faces changing, smiles and chatter, suddenly all angry eyes and gnashing teeth. And changing back again in a heartbeat. They're here, Pan said. The engines. This had to be them, didn't it? Kicking out their putrid signal, corrupting everything around them. It meant they were close. That was the good news. But the flip side was that Maman was close too, and his engineers could be anywhere. The redhead and whoever else he had working for him. More magpies, maybe. Pan glanced at the driver, wondering when he'd start pulling off his own face. But the man was just steering through traffic, barking out what sounded like French swear words at anything in his path. They were going over a wide, tree-lined river, the spire of Notre Dame visible to the left. There were half a dozen police boats in the water, lights flashing, but she couldn't see what they were doing. Hey, said Herc, and she saw that he was on his cell. 5 minutes, I want to be in and out, okay? Torp there? Yeah, good. And make sure the big girl is out. I want her. Big girl? Herc hung up, turned to the window. Jesus, he said again. The right bank of the Seine was worse, flashes of violence wherever she looked. A car lay crumpled around a lamppost, a sunburst of blood on the windshield. An ambulance was struggling up the street, too many vehicles and people in the way. Herc looked over his shoulder, met Pan's eye. She could read his thoughts like they were carved on his forehead. If it's like this now, then how bad is it going to get when the gates are opened? It took them 10 minutes in the end to navigate a handful of narrow streets. The taxi pulled to a halt outside a bakery, brakes squealing. The driver just about had his hand in Herc's face, demanding the money. Pan left him to it as she clambered out into the street, which was almost empty, although she could hear angry shouts from nearby. Well, here we are, said Herc as he joined her. Bakery, said Marlow, as he hopped onto the curb. Wow, Herc, you're really bringing out the big guns. What are you going to do? Beat Maman to death with a baguette? Lob croissants at him, added Truck. He frowned. Man, I want a croissant. No, said Pan, ignoring the way the city seemed to flicker and shift, another wave of anxiety snatching at her guts. We're going to buy a batch of cookies and convince him to change his mind, right? Herc turned and smiled at them, all scarred lips and missing teeth. You have no idea how right you are, he said, leading them through the door. And I will just double check. We've still got enough space. Yeah, we're all right. It's just, if it runs out of space, it's really annoying because it just cancels the recording and then I have to start again. The next chapter is called Herc's Big Girl. We'll read that one. Who could Herc's big girl be? The aroma of baking bread grabbed Marlow like a hug, pulling him into the store. He'd never experienced anything quite like this. This was the smell of home. At least he imagined it would be if his mum had ever baked bread. The closest she'd ever really come to cooking was burning frozen pizzas in the oven or adding an accidental flambé to a martini while drinking and smoking at the same time. The shop was busy. 3 men behind the counter and 3 times as many customers lining up. The display stands were full of things Marlow had never seen in his life. Breads in all shapes and sizes and colours. Cakes, too, in a case to the side that Truck was already drooling over. He turned to Herc with an expression that belonged to a hungry puppy. Oh, man, Herc, you know I love you, right? Just one, okay? Just that cream bun right there. And an eclair to keep it company. Herc ignored him, nodding to one of the servers, a hulking guy whose shiny bald spot was compensated for by a shaggy beard that stretched to his sternum. He looked more like a biker than a baker. He handed a customer some change, then walked out from behind the counter, cleaning his flour-covered hands on his apron. Herman, the big guy said in a heavy French accent. It took Marlow a moment to notice he'd spoken Herc's full name. I would say it was good to see you, but we both know you wouldn't be here if things were good, no? Herc grunted a reply and shook the man's hand. Come on, mon ami, Top is waiting for you. My accents are amazing, right? He led them past the counter and through a door in the back of the shop. Beyond was a short corridor that led into the heart of the bakery itself. The heat back here was intense, like they'd walked into a furnace, and Marlow had to wipe the sweat from his forehead. There were 2 industrial-sized ovens against the far wall, and the man walked to the farthest. He grabbed the handle, opening the large door. Inside was not an oven, but a corridor that stretched into darkness. "I'm sorry to hear what happened, Airman," the man said, clapping a big hairy hand on Herc's shoulder. "We never thought we would see the day that Maman took the engine. Our city, it is eating itself. Be quick, friend, find him." Herc nodded, curtly, then walked into the oven. Pan followed, then Truck. Marlow hurried after them, finding himself walking down a set of steep stone steps. They doubled back on themselves into a cellar, small and softly lit. There was one room and one man in it. He was in his 20s and looked like he'd just walked off a movie set. Gallic good looks, perfect dark hair, and a smile that seemed spotlight bright, especially when he turned it towards Pan. 5 seconds in, and Marlow already hated him. "Torp," said Herc. "Erk." "Erk," the guy replied as they shook hands. His accent was more subtle, his English better. He was standing in front of a table that had been draped with a dust cover. Marlow couldn't make any sense of the shapes beneath. "Ostheim said you would come, and he said you would need help." "He was right on both counts," Herc said. I'm French now. "You got what I need?" "As always." The guy grabbed the dust cover and pulled it away, revealing an assortment of weapons that would keep a special forces unit in business. Marlow counted 6 machine guns, twice as many pistols, a box of grenades, a couple of crossbows, and something that he thought existed only in action movies. "Is that a bazooka?" he asked, before he could stop himself. Everyone turned to look at him, and the French guy smiled even harder. I'm speaking French without meaning to. And the French guy smiled even harder. "You will have to fight Herc for it," he said. "This is his big girl." "Oh, shut up, Torp," said Herc. "You got rounds?" 3, said Torp. "Enough?" "It'll have to be. You got the other thing, right?" Torp shuffled uncomfortably, wiping a hand over his mouth. "Torp, tell me you got it." "I did," he said after a moment. "I do not like it, Herc. It is fighting fire with fire. It could do more damage than Maman." "No," said Herc. "It couldn't." Torp considered it, then nodded. He reached under the table and wrestled out a large green rucksack that looked like standard army issue. He dragged it across the floor and straightened, a sheen of sweat on his face. "Use it wisely," he said. Herc grunted, a noise that could have been a thanks or a laugh. "What about intel?" Herc said. "You found anything?" Torp shrugged. Maybe not. We have been monitoring activity. There are some leads. Coding machines have been going nuts. Our people are out there, Herc. You met Ostheim. What is he like?" Herc snorted, shaking his head. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Hell, you wouldn't believe me if I showed you a photo, guys. Well, he's not..." Herc swore, looked to Pan. "Looks like he couldn't win a fight with a blindfolded, one-legged kitten," she said. Torp frowned. "All these years fighting for somebody. Who'd have figured?" "Hey, he's still Ostheim," said Herc, nervously scanning the walls, the ceiling. "Don't judge a book by its cover and all that. He's still Ostheim." Torp swallowed hard, nodding. Then he broke into a smile again. "New recruits, I see," he said. "They seem to get younger every time." He glanced at Marlow. "Younger and rougher around the edges." "Yeah?" Marlow said, trying and failing to think of a comeback. "Who the hell are you? The baker?" Herc sighed. "Marlow, Pan, Truck, this is Torp, ex-engineer turned... I don't know, what's the kind word for it? Mercenary? Profiteer?" "Please," said Torp. "Businessman is just fine. It is good to meet you, Marlow, Truck, and Pan. What an honor. I did not think it was possible to make a deal with the engine for such beauty." "Oh, are you serious?" thought Marlow. He bit back a laugh, then almost choked on it when he saw Pan blush. She smiled, holding out her hand for Torp to shake. He grabbed it and kissed it, holding it for a fraction too long. Not that Pan made an effort to pull away. Marlow shuffled uncomfortably, realising that his own cheeks were heating up. For a cellar, this place was hot. "You were an engineer?" asked Pan when the French guy finally let her go. "I thought engineers just, stayed or died. I didn't think anyone had actually left." "Not many," said Torp. "Just a handful. I made more than 30 contracts back when I was a teenager. More missions than I could count." 84, said Herc. "But age is not an engineer's friend. Eventually the contracts became too complex even for Saul. God rest his soul." And so I left. Been working with us ever since, said Turk. Logistics, weapons, recon. Makes a damn fine sourdough, too. You heard about Saul, then? Torp nodded. Yeah, I heard. That bastard Mammon. I did not think it was possible, Erk. I did not think anyone could breach the red door. He glanced at Marlow, and the room heated up another 10 degrees. But we will find him. He is here somewhere. The engines are here. After all these years of looking, now is our chance. The blood on the streets does not lie. Only good thing about the engines being reunited, said Herc. Hopefully they'll lead us right to them. They know that, said Torp. They'll be waiting, and Mammon will be throwing out engineers as quickly as he can. Finding the engine is one thing, getting to it alive is something else. Which is where my big girl will come in, said Herc, walking to the table and hefting the bazooka onto his shoulder. You can make a deal for anything you like, but a high-explosive anti-tank warhead to the face is going to end you, contract or no contract. Amen to that, said Truck, walking to the table and picking up his shotgun. Dibs. He took a crossbow in his other hand and gave it to Pam. She took it, investigating its weight and sights. We have only 3 bolts, said Torp. All we had left after Morocco. They're old magic, though, straight from the engine. And they'll put it all in a demon. Cool, said Pam. And Marlow wasn't sure if her smile was for the crossbow or for the Frenchman. Marlow, said Urk. Grab something. I'm fine, he said, flexing his damp hands. I've got powers. They might not last, said Herc. Mammon could end them any minute now. Go on, take a weapon. Marlow swallowed, wondering how his throat could have gotten so dry. Herc was right. His contract could be cancelled at any time. It wasn't the loss of his strength and speed that scared him. It was the fact that his asthma would come back, and it would come back hard. The monster around his throat would be pissed, and he didn't even have an inhaler. He coughed at the thought of it, rubbed his chest. Then when he realised that everyone was waiting for him, he walked to the table. The guns looked big and mean, and ready to put a hole in him the moment he laid his hand on them. They won't bite, said Torp with a high-pitched chuckle. Marlow wanted to throw a punch at him, see if he was still laughing then. He reached out and grabbed the biggest machine gun, lifting it awkwardly to his chest. It stank of metal and grease. Oh, bloody hell, Marlow, said Herc. Put that down. Torp, give him a 45, will you? Torp laughed again, pulling the assault rifle from Marlow's grip. He laid it on the table, then picked up a small black pistol, handing it over. With every pair of the eyes in the room on him, Marlow didn't have any choice but to take it. He studied it. It looked like it fired Pez candy. It'll give you time and space if you need it, said Herc. Remember, unless they've traded for invulnerability, then you can still kill them. The perfect little gun for le petit garçon, said Torp. The little boy, for those of you that don't speak French. And he had the nerve to fire a wink at Pan. She stifled a smile, and Marlow's blood pressure rose so high he thought the top of his head was going to pop off. He tucked the gun into the waistband of his pants before he could crush it into a paperweight. It's not about the size, toupee, he muttered. It's about how well you can use it. Ha ha, and do you know how to use it? The guy replied, without missing a beat. Once again, Marlow's brain gave him nothing to come back with, and suddenly the whole room was laughing. His hackles rippled up, and for a moment the world burned so bright that he wasn't sure he could control himself. Then he felt a hand on his arm. Oh, ignore him, kiddo, Herc said, hefting the rucksack onto his back. It looked heavy. We've got more important things to worry about, Torp. Torp, ain't no point in sitting here staring at the walls. Where's the best lead? Where can we start? Where to start? The French guy mulled it over, his eyes scrolling the dirt floor. In this city? Where else could it be? We start with the dead. Right, let's stop there. That's an hour. Next chapter is called Nope. I'm sure we've had a chapter called Nope at some point in the past. Okay. There we go. I hope you enjoyed that. Really nice to see you all. No, I can't actually see you. I wish I could, but I can't. But it's nice to see that you are all there. And yeah, join me again soon for the next part of The Devil's Engine Hellfighters. And enjoy the rest of your day, whatever you're up to. Okay, have fun. Love you guys. Bye.